All right, let's get stuck into all of this with Chris's heavy-hitting political panel. We've got Liberal Senator Holly Hughes and former Labor power broker Graham Richardson. Holly, Richo, thank you for joining me tonight.
Good evening, Caleb. Nice to see you back up, Richo.
Always good to see you, Holly.
All right, good to have you both. Now, Richo, I have to go to you here first. You know, you've obviously heard what I've just said, and no doubt Anthony Albanese will be hoping to hit the reset button on the campaign trail this week after, what was a pretty rocky start. Already today, he's had to clarify his position on border policy. That's for the second time. I mean, Richo, what is going on with Albo here? Is he seriously going to make it 5 weeks?
I think he'll make it 5 weeks easily. I mean, it's a rocky start. I'm not going to deny that. I think he's had better weeks. But if you're going to have a bad week in a campaign, best to be the first, not the last. So I think we're just watching from now on. But I won't get worried unless I see him make another mistake, and I'm pretty sure he's going to be very careful not to do so.
Well, you'd hope so, but I mean, what about these allegations that he's infamous for not reading his policy briefings and the like? I mean, is this the Albanese you know, Richo?
No, actually, I've watched that with quite a bit of surprise, because I've known him a long time, and as far as I've been concerned, he's always been across his briefs. If anything, it's overdone. So the idea that he's in some way not reading them is completely foreign to me. It bears no relation to what I've witnessed over the last few decades.
Well, Holly, if Richo is right, and usually his attention to detail, Albo's attention to detail is overdone, we didn't see any of that this week. I mean, the Liberal Party, the coalition, you mob must be jumping up and down with joy at what you saw this week.
Look, we know elections have a long way to run. There's still 5 weeks to go in this election. I think a rocky start is perhaps the most diplomatic way I've heard Albo's start described, Richo. But talking about being over your brief, and I think it's become evident, Albanese's never had a financial portfolio, a treasury portfolio, national security portfolio, and today is an absolute shocker. We know Operation Sovereign Borders had 3 tenets. You had turning the boats back when safe, offshore processing, as well as temporary protection visas. And those 3 tenets ensured that Operation Sovereign Borders was a success. Sorry, I can't even get the word out. But, you know, it was that success that has seen the boats stop. The only person who I think knows who Albanese is in Australia at the moment in a positive light is perhaps the people smugglers that they're starting to line the boats up again. I mean, this is just extraordinary.
Well, I mean, as we said before, some of the missteps he's made this week have been pretty bad, and they continue to happen. Now, look, as I said earlier, you know, the coalition, you're in government, you can't get too cocky at this stage, but if you were rating your chances of winning the election after what you've seen this week, how would you be feeling?
Well, I think Australians are very cognisant to the fact that it is about cost of living pressures for them at the moment, as well as it is keeping our borders and our nation secure. And both of those issues are now at the forefront. And as you rightly pointed out in your introduction, every single Australian would know what the cash rate is, apart from the fact it's been the same for 2 years. But also, Josh mentioned the unemployment rate quite a number of times during the budget just a few weeks ago. It makes a significant difference to Australians' lives. And that cost of living pressure, if you do see a rate increase, whether it is on mortgages or whether it's then passed on through small and medium-sized businesses as they face greater pressure through their own business loans, of course it's going to have a significant impact. And I think Albanese has shown he is just not up to the job. But where is the rest of his team? I mean, they're almost all in hibernation or isolation. It's just extraordinary. I mean, maybe they're embarrassed to be seen with him. I don't know.
Well, it would seem Kevin Rudd might be, but look, we put the torch on the Labor Party. Let's put the torch on the Libs now. Been going on for a little while. Liberal candidate for Warringah, Katherine continues to cause headaches and fractures within the party. PM Scott Morrison continues to back her, despite calls from some within the party and plenty outside to disendorse her over her views on transgender people. Holly, do you think Katherine needs to go, or does she deserve the support of the Prime Minister?
Well, I think it's interesting that we see today Richard Marles out there calling for action around Katherine Deves. Now, this is Richard Marles, who was completely silent when the Labor candidate for Hunter was exposed for having some rather unsavoury previous social media posts on his own profile. And of course, he came out, removed them and apologised in the same way that Ms Deves has done. And that's actually, what's happened here. If it's good for one, it's good for the other. But the fact that it is Richard Marles who's dared to put his head up on this issue, I find absolutely distasteful and disgusting. This is the man who Kimberley Kitching confided in, yet he now is some moral crusader. I do not think so. So, Ms Deves has apologised for what she said. I think there's been broad agreement what she said at the time was inappropriate. The candidate for Hunter from the Labor Party had a very similar situation. Labor Party did not demand the disendorsement there. And quite frankly, Richard Marles, I don't think should at any time in the future put his head up as some sort of moral crusader.
Well, it's interesting. Maurice Payne danced around this a bit more than you did just then this morning, Holly. But Richo, is this a distraction the Prime Minister doesn't need?
Well, I think that anything like that, when you're getting onto subjects like transgenders, it's really going to always end in tears. You can't win if you are looking favourably in their direction. Then you've got the Christians who are looking unfavourably at you, and so it's really hard to get your foot in front. And so I think what Scott Morrison will want to be doing is jumping into the trench and lying as flat on his back in there as he can, let this commotion pass over him, let this chalice pass over him, he might say, and then resume normal business.
The dog barks and the caravan rolls on. We'll stick with you, Richo. An issue that looks like it'll dominate the campaign this week, and the Nine papers have been pushing it fairly hard, is that of a federal ICAC, with criticism that the coalition broke its promise on the issue. But there have been a number of Liberal MPs who have come out insisting the issue isn't a major concern for voters. Richo, do you think anyone's rolling up to the ballot box going, "Where's the federal ICAC"?
No, I don't. I don't think anyone's going to do that. I think a federal ICAC's just unnecessary anyway, and so I'd be surprised if Scott Morrison did it. But Labor seems to be now wedded to the idea. It will finish up being a huge pain in the bum for them. That I can bet you. All ICACs do is examine the people who put them in place. And try and put them out of place. So it doesn't strike me as very sensible.
Well, it's claimed a few Labor people in New South Wales, that's for sure. But I mean, Holly, Labor's said that they'll get this thing going almost immediately if they win government. A, is it workable? But B, if that's what they want to do.
Absolutely, it's not. How wedded to it are they, Richo? How wedded are they when they've got a 2-page document outlining what they think this Federal Integrity Commission should look like? It's nothing but drivel that they've managed to put out. The Coalition did put together a plan for a Federal Integrity Commission.
You don't need a 500-page tome to say what something will look like, especially something that's in all the states, it's everywhere.
Richo, you and I are on a unity ticket here that I don't think this is the biggest issue facing voters at all. But how can you declare you'll be ready to implement one when you've got a 2-page flyer with the entire content? I mean, it's just a joke. The Labor Party are taking the Australian voters for mugs if they think that that's going to carry weight.
You don't need some massive document to put in place an ICAC. The examples of it are all over Australia. I think we can agree you need more than 2 pages of detail.
It
is just not that hard to do. And we've got experience. We've got tons of experience.
Well, they can do it. They can do it overnight. It sounds like they can do it overnight.
Well, at least Albo might be able to remember
it'd be pretty good effort.
Mate, you might be able to remember it if it's only 2 pages.
It'd be a pretty good effort. I know, I know. Now, speaking of what voters are
Anyway,
concerned
you're talking
about,
to the wrong person.
there's a tracking
I'm not in
poll
favour
of
of
15
ICACs
marginal
anywhere.
seats. There's a tracking poll of 15 marginal seats shows that COVID has collapsed as a priority since January while the cost of living has surged. COVID's dropped from the top priority to fifth, with the economy and taxes coming high up the list. But interestingly, at the same time as COVID has dropped off, health has come right to the top as an issue. Holly, you know, we've just seen what happened in South Australia. That was basically a health election. But people are sick of thinking and talking about COVID. They want it out of the way.
Oh, absolutely. I think everyone has just had more than enough of COVID. And we say this, you know, sending love to Smithy tonight, who's getting his dose of it as we speak.
Yes.
You know, I had mine a couple of weeks ago. So it definitely seems to be rampant at the moment. But again, not taking people out in the same way that it was expected. It's sort of a cold or a flu, a couple of days in bed. And then people are getting on with their lives and getting over it. Certainly not a position where we need to be seeing businesses and lockdowns and all of those things occurring and having those impacts on the economy anymore. I think what is interesting as you see health becoming more of important, and there's two sides to this. State government received an awful lot of money from the federal government to prepare for COVID. I, for one, would be particularly interested to see some of the audits around what the states have spent that money on, because it's the states that run the hospitals and do the spending. The federal government provided an awful lot of money to them, and yet a lot of these states are still seeing very, very significant ramping issues. But I think where we are going to see health come to the fore as well, and I think this is something that's incredibly serious for us as a country, and I think even potentially globally, is whilst we have been facing the pandemic, a lot of people have put off other things that they would normally have done. So whether that's, you know, breast screens, you know, prostate checkups, heart checks, all of those sorts of things, I think a number of people have been putting those off, and I think that's where we're going to see health come to the fore, because people will start to see those issues maybe raise their heads again.
And it's quite obvious in breast screening. Now, we've only got 30 seconds, but Richo, I have to ask you about this. There's been a noticeable absence from the campaign trail. There's no Kevin Rudd. Do you reckon Kevin Rudd is going to stand up next to Anthony Albanese at some point? And if he does, will it be electoral poison?
Well, I hope he doesn't. And I hope if he offers Anthony somewhat nicely, refuses him. Kevin Rudd is electoral poison, and you just can't stand with him. It is a very bad idea.
I think we might be talking next week about how Rudd's visits went. I think I saw he's coming this week. Bring him on, I say.
Oh, my God, well, it'll be an even worse week for Albo if they go down that road. God help him. Holly Hughes, Graham Richardson, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thanks, Caleb. See you, Richo.
Pleasure.